Tax payments from local companies in Nigeria dropped by 15% in quarter four to 2023 per the National Bureau of Statistics. The CIT revenue to the federal government declined for the second consecutive quarter to 533.93 billion naira. President Bola Tinubu's petrol subsidy removal announcement led to soaring pump price and currency devaluation affecting businesses. Despite challenges, tax revenue from both local and foreign firms surged by 72.8% to 4.89 trillion naira in 2023. Technology like Tax Pro Max improved tax collection efficiency, and Nigeria's total tax incentives to companies amount to approximately 6 trillion naira annually. This morning, Abiodun Kayode-Alli, an economist and senior manager at PwC Nigeria, joins me to unpack this. It's nice having you around.
Thank you for having me, Lekan.
Okay, so how did the CIT revenue to the federal government perform in the fourth quarter of last year? And what would you say are the factors that contributed to the decline compared to the previous quarter?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. So generally, if I look at it year on year, what we've seen is that the tax authorities have actually been experiencing an increase. But there is something I need to clarify before I comment directly on the question you asked. So for the year 2023, what you would see would mostly be revenues relating to the 2022 financial year of a company, because the tax laws gives a company 6 months after its financial year end to actually file their tax returns. So what you would most likely, and because most companies have a financial year end of December, so what you would most likely see in 2023 would relate to the financial period of 1st of January 2022 to 31st of December 2022. That's what you will see being recorded in 2023, right? Then now to go to your question, what typically then happens is, like I said, given the fact that most companies have a financial year end of December, what you would then see is that most of them actually make their remittances or they pay their taxes on the deadline, which happens to be the last day of the month of June, right? Then for any company that is unable to meet that deadline of June, you would see the inflow in July. Given the fact that June and July are second quarter and third quarter, so these are the periods where you see majority of the inflows, right? So that then means that probably companies that are late in complying, they are probably the ones that file probably in the fourth quarter, or few companies who have a year end of March. If their year end is March 2023, then they would have to comply in September, or they would have to comply in the fourth quarter. So for a company to pay its taxes in the fourth quarter, most likely that company either has a year end of June, for instance, June 2023, then it can make its payments in the fourth quarter. So these are the real reason, in summary, in a nutshell, would simply be because companies typically, few companies have their year end in the second quarter, which would then mean that their remittances would be occurring in the fourth quarter.
Okay.
That's typically what we see as the reason.
Okay, so I'd like you to equally explain the impact of President Bola Tinubu's announcement of petrol subsidy removal on the business environment in Nigeria, as was mentioned in the reports.
Yeah, so as you can, I'm sure you all know about this, that the impact of the removal of the subsidy on the 29th of May, it did come with its impacts in terms of cost of production. Power in Nigeria is unstable, right? A lot of companies in the financial sector, in the manufacturing sector, even small and medium scale businesses, they have to rely on alternative sources of energy. That is diesel, petrol, right? Empowering their businesses, right? So one thing that we can we all know is that generally businesses struggled in terms of their operating expenses, in terms of power. So the impact of that, the removal of the subsidy, definitely impacted on them, not just in terms of power, but also in terms of transport and logistics, right? So I'll give you a good example. Look at some of these listed companies. If you go online and you check their website, you check their activities for that period of 2023, you will see an increase in costs. Dangote, for instance, there was a significant increase in the haulage expenses, about 50 billion naira. And you can think about other companies as well, the banks, the likes of the banks, in terms of their expenses, right? In terms of diesel costs, these soared high. Right. So these are some of the implications, negative implications, right? Even though it might be positive to the government in terms of revenue allocation that is being distributed among the states, for most businesses, this actually led to significant increases, given the price that petrol, most especially petrol, rose from somewhere within the range of 160 naira to a liter to somewhere within the range of 600 naira to a liter. So these are the impact on the expenses of these businesses, and it would ultimately affect their bottom line, which is their profits. Yeah, so these are some of the impacts that we can expect.
So, as at the time the president rolled out the fuel subsidy removal and enacted the regime, were there some cushionings that you were expecting that the president should have put in place? Because a couple of people felt at that time where businesses and companies were struggling, there should have been some sort of tax incentives being rolled out and the elimination of multiple taxes and some other tax laws that needed to have been amended just to help or just to give these businesses a buffer or to help them, stay afloat while this particular subsidy regime is being rolled out and we begin to see the effect in full force.
Yeah, and that's a very good one. So to be honest, yes, a lot of us do agree that there should have been alternatives put in place. Yes, we can't say that a lot of things should have been done because if you consider it, the fuel itself, it's not the end. It's you don't need the fuel to consume it as an end product. It's actually a means to an end, right? The fuel is used for transport and it's also used for power. So we do agree that the government should have put in place plans to ease transportation. And a lot has been said with respect to alternative sources of transporting individuals, with respect to the compressed natural gas that has been discussed. Some of the things that the federal government did was to remove VAT on diesel, right? To pushing the impact of those who make use of that product. Then also with respect to power, one would have expected that a lot would have been done, right, in terms of electricity distribution, but we know that's not the case, especially with respect to the grid collapse that we've been experiencing in recent times. Even apart from the subsidy removal, if you remember on the 14th of June, there was also the unification of the exchange rate, which also impacted on these businesses to the extent whereby most of businesses, popular businesses that you know, like the likes of the MTN, the Airtel, they recorded losses coming all as a result of that devaluation of the naira, right? So these are some of the challenges that we experienced. I do agree that the government has done something with respect to setting up if you remember, the fiscal committee and also the tax policy reform committee. I know that the government has done something with setting up that committee to look into some of the taxes that are being applied to remove most of the instances where we have multiplicity of taxes. So I know that works are currently ongoing. The committee actually, it was inaugurated on the 14th of August, sometime around then, or 8th of August. Right. I know the committee actually came up with a quick win report, which they gave to the president and was even helpful with the removal of that VAT on the diesel. And I know so many other initiatives are also coming up, especially with the removal of, you remember initially the ban that was placed, let me just say the restriction that was placed on accessing Forex to some 41 items, right? So these are some of the recommendations that came out from that committee. But I know more would be released subsequently. I think it's something we just have to be patient and wait for.
Interesting. So let's look at the issue sectorally. Which sectors would you say contributed to the most rather, to tax revenue in Nigeria last year. According to the MBS reports, what factors would you say influenced their contributions, and how do you think they're faring now if you are to do a comparison?
And that's a fantastic question, Lekan. So, based on the reports, it was expected. We had the manufacturing sector contributing the highest share to companies' income tax. Then we also had the financial and insurance sector. Then we also had the ICT sector, information communication technology, and it was quite understandable if you consider the fact that look at the impact of these sectors, even from a GDP perspective, right? They were doing quite well. The manufacturing sector were doing well, especially those who were involved in fast-moving consumer goods, right? The cement, right? Dangote cement. I mean, they were doing quite well because you just have to go for these products, right? They were necessary, absolutely essential, right? Then the financial service sector was also doing well, and I believe will do well in 2023, given the fact that the monetary policy rate has been increased since 2022 from 11.5% to currently at 24.75%, right? We've seen that progressive increase. So in terms of their interest income, they will do well. And as long as their bottom line, their accounting profits are fine, and they don't have much exemptions, much incentives, they would also contribute positively in terms of tax remittances. But one thing I must say, because your question said we should juxtapose the performance of the collection
Yeah.
in 2023 with what we are going to expect
Mm.
for the ICT sector, especially if you look at the likes of big players like Airtel and MTN, we're not quite sure they're going to do quite well in terms of remittances. Well, they might actually also. If you look at their bottom line was significantly impacted by exchange losses, right? So from a tax perspective, even though we typically adjust for such exchange differences, it leaves to be seen. There might be instances where they might not do quite as well in terms of remittance compared to what was done in 2022. So there were some sectors that these policies actually impacted on positively. There were some sectors that it impacted on negatively. For the financial service sector, they will do quite well, right, due to the exchange gains. For the manufacturing sector, the ICT sector, maybe not quite as well as the financial service sector.
Okay, so let's look at how we can improve tax efficiency. Now, how has technology, particularly the Tax Pro Max solution introduced by the Federal Inland Revenue Service, improved tax collection efficiency and compliance in Nigeria?
Yeah, so that's a very great one that we need to touch on. So Tax Pro Max was one of the brainchild of the Federal Inland Revenue Service introduced back in 2021. One thing that this tool has done is to allow for efficiency. It has allowed for efficiency in the sense that it has reduced the time it takes for filing your tax returns as well as making payments. Back in the past, prior to the introduction of these particular technology, you will see situations whereby individuals would have to go physically to the tax offices carrying big files and big documents, right? But you can do this, you can file your tax returns right from the comfort of your home, right? Without actually visiting a physical office. That's one. Then also in terms of remittances, right? It has actually bridged the gap, right, whereby you have to interact with officials physically in making payments, right? Right now, for you to actually make payment to the tax authorities, you have to actually go through this channel. So this actually kind of reduces leakages in the system, right? So these are some of the efficiencies we've seen. Then I think one other thing that the Tax Pro Max portal has also been able to do is that back then there used to be room for judgment. You can say this advantage, it could be a pro or a con,
Mm.
depending on whether you're looking at it from the side of the taxpayer or the tax authority, right? Back then, when you had to pay for some certain taxes, or even in instance of non-compliance, there was this element of judgment that could be given by the tax controller in a particular office, right? There
Okay.
was the element of judgment, right? But this element of judgment is totally taken off. If a taxpayer is not compliant at a particular point in time, the platform has been automated in such a way that it actually calculates your penalties and the
Okay.
interest, even though this is something that we think there needs to be stakeholder consultation
Mm.
more into.
Okay, Abiodun Kayode-Alli, economist and senior manager at PwC Nigeria. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me, Lekan.